Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Some mysteries live in the shadows. Others begin after your heart stops or your spirit leaves your body. Today I have on the show with me Aaron Green, who at a very early age experienced what some would call a near-death experience that has changed his life ever since. So we're going to find out more about that with Aaron, who's on the show with us. Aaron, thank you for being on. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my experience.
Absolutely. And Aaron, as we get into this, where are you joining us from today?
Sure. So my name's Aaron Thomas Green. I currently live in Chesapeake, Virginia. I'm married with 3 young adult children, and I work as an electrical engineer at a company called Newport News Shipbuilding. We make aircraft carriers and submarines for the U.S. Navy.
Wonderful. That's amazing. I like the way you described your children. You called them young adult children. Is that what you said?
Right.
I'm going to use that. I really like that.
Yeah, legally they're adults, but they still seem pretty young to me.
Yeah, we still do a lot for them, don't we? Here and there. Yeah. It's kind of funny. I've had my children move out, but we've got a basement that's an apartment, and they tend to come back every now and then, which is okay because they bring back the grandchildren, so I'm okay with that. Yeah. How long have you lived out there? Is that somewhere you've been your whole life, or?
So I was born in Durham, North Carolina, 1975, and when I was 2, my parents moved to Chesapeake, Virginia. So I've pretty much been here my whole life, except I went to Virginia Tech for college, and I lived in Washington, D.C. and North Carolina briefly with some short-time jobs, but mostly I've been in Chesapeake, Virginia my whole life.
Amazing. And this year, so I live in Utah, and it's been really, really warm, not a lot of snow.
Okay.
Which is bad, right, for these mountains and the snow, the ski resorts. How about over there? Has it been I know the East Coast has been hit with some weather this year, so is that what you guys experienced there?
It does seem warmer than it did when I was a child, I will have to say, but, this year things have been relatively normal, not too outside the normal, but I do feel like it's been a little warmer than it was when I was a kid, but I don't really know how accurate that is.
Yeah, exactly. I've said the same thing before, and then I thought to myself, I should look that up to see if that's really true. It just feels that way sometimes, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, I don't know if it's just me or if that's the case. I couldn't say.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, we're going to get into this, just for everybody out there. We're going to jump into some questions first. Then we're going to hear Aaron's experience from start to finish, and then we'll end it off with some questions as well. But before we do all that, I do want to ask you just a real general question, which is, do you think you would be a very different person today if you hadn't had the experience you did?
I'd certainly be different. I hope I wouldn't be that different, but if I'm being honest, I think I make a more concerted effort to be a good person, to treat other people well, to try to give people the benefit of the doubt, try not to lose my temper, that kind of thing. Try to find, ways to help someone else that maybe I wouldn't otherwise spend the effort to do that. So I do think it's changed me. I can't really gauge how dramatically it's changed me, but I think it's changed me for the better. I certainly try to be, good to other people, help where I can, that sort of thing. I try to focus on integrity, honesty, generosity, service, truthfulness, kindness, that kind of thing. I consider those traits much more important based on my experience.
Yeah. I think it's funny because, not that I know this experience, but I know sometimes when people experience the end of their life as they get older, I know that a lot of times they reflect on life and they think, what did I do that really was important? And oftentimes they reevaluate and they decide, man, I probably should have made some different decisions. And in your case, maybe it started the other way around, like it gave you that informed experience early to help you shape the way you think. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I got a glimpse into how things work. What is important. I got a glimpse of that, and it was pretty clear. Our relationships with other people. It's really important. Just being that good person, doing the things that you should be doing. Like that is what's really important. That's what I saw.
Yeah. Okay, everybody out there, so I already kind of gave Aaron a heads up that I'm going to ask some questions from all over the place, because I think sometimes experience is beyond what we have in this space here. It often helps us to think differently about other issues too. And so that's why we're going to start with some of these questions. But I was going to ask you, Aaron, do you feel that consciousness is tied to the body? Or did your experience suggest it exists differently or independently?
Yeah, my experience made it pretty clear to me that we have consciousness independent of the body. We don't need this body to be conscious. And I view the physical body is more like a limiter, like it holds back our consciousness. It restricts us. Mm-hmm. And that restriction is helpful because it allows us to change ourselves in a way that we couldn't otherwise. Almost like lifting a heavy weight at the gym can help you gain muscle. Well, having your consciousness trapped in this physical realm, it like can challenge the body challenge the soul, and you need to exert extra effort to do certain things, and exerting that extra effort helps us grow and mature and learn.
That's why I love doing these interviews, because the way you described that, I really like that. I really like that a lot, because it gives a partnership between your soul and the flesh.
Right.
An important job for being together. I really like that.
Yeah. It's not just random that we're here. There's like a reason for it. There's a purpose, and there's a reason for the way things are. And having a glimpse of that, I can kind of see that it's actually beautiful and it makes sense. I know we're here. It seems all crazy and confusing, but there's a purpose to this. There's a reason we're here living these lives.
Yeah. I wonder what your thoughts are on organized religion, because there's religion all over the place looking at this unknown to the rest of the world very differently. Right. And so, you now have seen something from the other side. Like, what are your thoughts on how organized religion, what do you think about religion in general, and then the way they approach all of this?
Sure. I view organized religion as a nice starting point. Like it's a good place for someone to get some basic knowledge, some understanding about God, morality, that kind of thing, how to treat other people. Hopefully their religion focuses on a little bit of that. So I think it's a nice starting point, but as a person grows and learns and understands more, inevitably their spiritual growth will kind of push against the edges of the religion. And the religion is going to try to put them back in the box. The religion will be like, no, don't leave this box. But in order to grow and mature and understand more things, you would have to leave that box. And this is all the religions. I'm not narrowing down to any one of them. And so you either get stuck in that religion, which holds you back from further development and growth, or you need to kind of step out of the religion and say, okay, this religion, maybe it's good and it has a lot of good positive points, but really to grow, you got to look beyond that religion. And that's true with all these different religions. So I view them as like a nice starting point, but it tends to hold people back as they grow and mature. And the religions, they push a rigid, dogma, and you need to believe this rather than, you should explore and learn and seek greater understanding. And it's just, unfortunately, for a lot of people who are seeking a deeper knowledge of these spiritual things, it ends up holding them back and restricting them rather than encouraging them to grow and learn more.
Yeah, the big word that stuck out that you said right there to me was rigidity. I mean, the fact that it really is kind of like pulls you into something that some people become very uncomfortable with that over time. Others fall right in line. So it is interesting because different people kind of approach that differently. But I can see that. I can see what you're saying here. Time. Okay. Your understanding of time. How do you feel about that? I mean, we experience on this plane of existence very linear time.
Right.
However, what does your experience say about time for you?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that question. Basically, one of the first things I noticed when I left my body was that time just is not what we think of it as. It's just fundamentally different. Like I could feel that at my core. It was like just self-evident. The way I view time, I think time, space, and matter are all kind of an artificial constraint created by God to allow us to have this experience. But they're not like fundamental traits. They're not spiritually, they don't have the same kind of importance that they have here. But time specifically, I don't think it works the way we perceive it. We think it's very linear, and everything in the past is set, and nothing in the future is set. But I don't think that's how it works at all. I think God can kind of orchestrate events across time, past, present, and future. And some of the stuff that we think of as being in the past, like I don't think that's all set yet. Like, and if you look at I hope I'm not going too far outside the scope here, but if you look at quantum physics, like quantum physics has already proven that time just doesn't work the way we think of it. Like it's proven. Like they've done experiments and they've shown this. Like that cat, it was Schrodinger's cat. If you ever look at that, if you understand that, I think that's true on a much bigger scale, and that time just isn't how we perceive it.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I do think science is starting to see just how very different at that microscopic level are those quantum activities that happen. That does not make sense to the normal mind. That is so true, but it's kind of a window into something that we should spend more time trying to understand.
Yeah. What I'm suggesting is that these quantum time principles that we're just beginning to discover, that those actually exist on a larger scale, and they affect things at a much larger, like at our level, and that it just doesn't work the way we think it does. And I don't know if I can explain it well, but there's clearly a difference in how time works than that linear progression we're so used to thinking of. We're so stuck by it that it's hard to think outside of that. But I think you got to get outside of that way of thinking if you really want to get to the truth.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm glad you said that. I've heard people say with certain experiences, even things like outer body experiences and stuff like that, where when their spirit or soul breaks free from the flesh, that everything appears so much different, so more vibrant.
Right.
So, like, there's a sense of clarity beyond the senses of what the body allows you to have. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Like I said, I think the body kind of holds us back. It restricts us. And when when we're free from the body, we can perceive things in much more detail, much more clearly. More vibrant colors is a good example I've heard. We're just like a more intense version of ourselves, and our senses are heightened. And I heard one NDE say something like, here in the physical, we've got like 5 senses or whatever it might be, but in the spiritual, there's like 100 senses, and that kind of fits with my experiences. It's just such a more vivid reality, and everything is more intense and extreme, and mostly that's a good thing. But yeah, it's much more vivid and just a more intense reality.
Yeah. So this next question is a little bit heady. So do you think reality is something we perceive or something we participate in creating? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I think it's a bit of both. We're active participants in this reality. The way we think, the way we act, all of it, it affects us and affects others. And we're involved in the creation and the execution of this reality, and what we think and do affects ourselves and others quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe we'll touch on this a little bit as we go through your experience, but you, me, each individual here, what are we really? So many
Okay.
people get locked into what they see with their eyes, this meat body, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But what are we?
So fundamentally, I think we are a spiritual entity having a brief physical experience. And that spiritual entity, I view it, we're all like a little piece of God. Like we're forever connected to God. We're kind of like, we're both part of God and we're like a individual. We're kind of like the best of both worlds. Somehow that works together in a way I couldn't quite describe. And we're here in this physical body, living this brief experience because it benefits us. We gain from going through this experience. Like it's a kind of like a spiritual boot camp or kindergarten. Like we're here to learn, to gain experience, to gain wisdom. And but fundamentally, this physical reality, that's not what we are. We're a spiritual entity.
Yeah. I love the way you've described it. It's something to be excited and optimistic about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because some people don't know what's coming next or what came before, and we'll probably get into some of that. But what a neat way to think of everything. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like language is probably not sufficient to really describe everything you've experienced. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. I view it like you're on the beach with a stick and you're trying to draw a great work of art. That's what it's like here with words to try to describe the spiritual realm. We're not going to be able to do it justice.
Yeah, yeah. Now there are mathematically, they believe there are, I don't know if it's 12 or 13 or 11 dimensions. I don't know if that's the true number today. I just remember when I was in college, that's what it was. How do you think that fits into things? I mean, not to divert here, but, we see some stuff with UAP and UFOs that appear to be multidimensional. So it really does look like there's something there. Also, when we were talking earlier about just everything, when you drive it down into that microscopic place where we can see the different things that matter does, it feels like there's things moving in and out of dimensions too. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's something to everything you're talking about. I don't know if I'm the right guy to explain any of it. My experience didn't really get into that kind of detail in a way that I could explain it, but I think there's so much more to this, the face value reality that we're so used to. But talking about different dimensions, I couldn't explain it. I think you're on the right track there, but I don't think I could really add much to that conversation.
No, I appreciate that. Do you interpret coincidences as synchronicities in everyday life?
I heard someone say once that there are no coincidences, and I think that's probably the case. I think it's a deliberate, like it's supposed to be like a little bit hidden to us that some of this stuff is going on because it allows us to have the kind of experience we're supposed to have. But I guess I don't really believe in coincidences. I think, God is capable of planning all kinds of stuff that we couldn't even imagine. And I think God uses like every tool available to tweak this reality without violating our free will, but in such a way that it maximizes the benefit to us. And I realize people might think, well, that's crazy. I'm going through these difficulties, so clearly that's not true. But the point of being here is to go through some of these difficulties because it stretches us and it grows us and it gives us challenges that we overcome and make us stronger and teach us. So no, I don't really think coincidences are really a thing. I think probably a lot of that is planned out.
Yeah. I like that. I like everything you're saying. A lot of times for me, I think of our existence here as almost we are given a curriculum for growth. And you come to this planet, you come to this place, and maybe I am strong or weak in certain areas, and my experience here in this life is to strengthen and build in areas that I could use help.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's kind of what you're saying too, and it does feel so true when you just think about that. Yeah.
Right.
Aaron, go ahead and get into your story now for us. Tell us what all happened to you. Maybe start off, if you can, I would love also, if you can recall, just helping us to try to see it through your eyes, like the moments, when something happened, like what you remember seeing. Any of that would be wonderful if you could.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I'll just go through my whole experience. So my experience took place when I was shortly before my 6th birthday. I was in, I grew up in a suburban environment, and I used to play with friends all the time. We would just run around the neighborhood doing all kinds of stuff. And I was in a neighbor's backyard with maybe 5 different friends, my brother and some other neighborhood friends. And we were just, doing whatever kids do, playing. And something happened. I don't know what happened, but I couldn't breathe. Something caused a breathing problem for me, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get a breath of air in. And I realized this was getting really serious, and I was becoming very concerned about it. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to go home and try to get help from my parents. I started walking away from my friends, and I got maybe 20 feet away, something like that. And this breathing problem, it triggered something deeper. It triggered the release of my consciousness, like whatever it is I really am, the true me. It left my body, and I saw my body fall to the ground. And I was just kind of floating there as a consciousness, but I could see my body there. And I looked back at my friends and what we had been doing, and my breathing problem. It all seemed so trivial to me. It seemed like my life was like really I don't know, small or insignificant. And like I mentioned previously, time, like the flow of time, like I could feel that it was somehow different than what I was used to. And this was kind of like waking up from a dream, only this physical life that I had been living, that was the dream, and I was like more intelligent, more aware. I had heightened senses. It was like I was a more intense version of myself, and it felt good. Like it was very comfortable to be like that, like more comfortable than living in a body. And a couple things happened very, very quickly. One is my entire life like flashed before me in extreme detail. And what really stood out to me, or what I really think is interesting, is that not only did I re-experience all my own thoughts and emotions and feelings, but like I could literally feel how I had made others feel. And what stood out was my parents, because as a 6-year-old, that was who I primarily had dealt with in life. And like I could feel how I had made them feel in all kinds of situations. And a couple things really stood out. One was my mother's love for me. That had a significance to it. And my father's frustrations and anger at like changing dirty diapers, and when I was crying and screaming, and some of the stresses of being a dad. Like I could feel his stresses. It's kind of funny. I have 3 kids of my own, so I understand that from a different perspective now. But it was perfectly clear what was going on. But it also like came across that it wasn't my fault. Like I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just being a baby. Somehow that I hadn't done anything wrong to cause his frustration. Like that was important. And then I saw a light in the distance, and somehow I knew it was important. Like I was instinctively drawn to this light. And I recognized it. I felt like I remembered it, but I couldn't place it. I couldn't understand, and so I didn't continue to focus on that light. But I remember it very clearly. Just a pinpoint of light in the distance. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I was not going to stop you, but my mind's going. So can I ask a couple questions? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. When you left the body, it sounds like this was not a fearful moment for you. It sounds like it was
not at all.
Comforting. Yeah.
And no fear at all. It was not a bad thing. It didn't feel bad to leave my body in any way.
Were you surprised at that moment? Do you remember if that was like, whoa, look at this? I thought this would feel differently. Do you have anything like that you remember?
There was a little bit of that, but I think being a kid, like it's kind of like everything is new.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like just another new thing. As adults we kind of forget that, but as a kid, it's just everything you do is new. And so I think I rolled with it a little better because that's just what it is to be a kid.
Yeah. You mentioned a pin or a light at a distance. Was this up distance laterally? Do you remember where you saw that?
Roughly what would that be? 45 degree, give or take. angle,
Okay.
up, in the distance.
And what
Yeah.
what were your thoughts about that light at the time? Were you kind of like, it's good for me, or what were you
It,
thinking?
it's like it's important. There's something
Ah,
important about it, but
you
I
did say
didn't
that.
know what it was, and I didn't continue to focus on it. It's like a distant memory. Like that's what it felt like. Somehow I recognized it, but I couldn't quite place it. That's kind of what it felt like.
Awesome. I'll do this if I'm shaking
All right.
in my seat here to ask you a question, but please go right ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
All right, yeah, no problem. So I started to have questions. I was just kind of floating there in my neighbor's backyard, and I would start to have questions. And as I would have questions, the answers would like come to me in extreme detail. It's like I was connected to a deeper pool of knowledge that I can't really explain. But these answers to my questions would come in extreme detail. And the first question I had was, what am I? It was obvious I wasn't this physical body. And I was like, well, what am I? And I could see myself it's almost like I could see myself from the outside. And in that, at that point, I was just like a round orb of consciousness, just like a faint ball of light, almost like a bubble. Or as a kid, I kind of thought I looked like an egg, just a round orb. But there was faint light coming within, and there was kind of like a structure, like an internal structure to that faint ball that I didn't understand it then. I don't understand it now. Just I remember that there was some sort of structure, some sort of significance inside this ball. It was more complicated than just a bubble,
Yeah.
And then I had more questions. I was like, well, okay, well, I'm not this physical body, but like, what am I doing? Why am I here in this place? Like, what's going on? Like, where did I come from, and why am I here? And so this memory, something that I had been through previously, but I had totally forgotten while I was living this life, it replayed for me to answer my question. And this memory started out, I was a orb of consciousness, just like I was there, but I was with hundreds or thousands of other orbs of consciousness, and we were all together in what I call a sea of light. That like there was a whole bunch of us, and it was extremely bright, and we were all just we were together, and we were like ignorant. We didn't know anything. We didn't have any experience, any background. We were content and safe, but we didn't know anything or understand anything, and we were okay with that because we were content. And periodically we'd get a gift or a treat. As a kid, I thought of it like it reminded me of getting a cookie, but it wasn't a cookie. It was just some sort of spiritual treat or gift that we would all get. It would come down and everyone would get one, and it kind of like made us happy. But one time there was like one fewer gifts than there were souls in this group. So I made the decision, okay, there's not enough of these gifts, so I'm just going to let these souls around me get it, and I'll just pass it up. It's not a big deal. And when the last treat came to the last other soul, I was very gently lifted up out of this group, and a higher level of intelligence contacted me. It was like a mind-to-mind communication, and this higher intelligent basically said that it was my creator, and I was very much loved and cared for, and that what I had done was very important, that giving up something I wanted for those around me was very important, and that it indicated I was ready to begin some sort of process or get started or something like that. So I just called my creator God for simplicity, and God went on to say essentially that there was a wonderful existence in store for me. Like the fact that I existed was a really terrific thing, like just absolutely fantastic. But I was like immature. I wasn't ready to appreciate or enjoy my existence the way I was meant to, and that God had prepared a like training for me so that I could learn and grow, and it would like prepare me to properly appreciate this wonderful existence that had waited for me. But God said it would be difficult, but it would be very, very short. And I can't stress that how short it would be. That like that came across in the communication. It's going to be very short compared to my greater existence out, beyond this training. And I thought, well, okay, you're God. You made me. You created me. Couldn't you just make me how I need to be so I can enjoy my existence without going through some sort of difficult experience. And God said, absolutely. God was fully capable of changing me any way He would want to, but that I was created with free will. Like not me, not just me, but all of us. We were created with free will, and free will was like a core principle of our creation in the first place. And that if God changed me forcibly or created me that I already had this kind of knowledge or choices or whatever, it would like violate my free will and violate the core reason for us being created in the first place. So it wouldn't work. And God went on to explain that how it works is pretty straightforward. God is loving, kind, compassionate, generous, forgiving, honest. All these nice traits, what we think of as the positive traits. Like that's what God is. God is those things. And for us to really enjoy our existence, we need to freely choose those same traits for ourselves. And that God had prepared a training realm or this training program or education, whatever you want to call it, where we would be able to learn those traits. We would learn the importance of those traits because those traits would bring us good things, and the traits that are counter to those godly traits, they would bring us, they would not bring us happiness, that kind of deal. And through trial and error, we would inevitably learn. Yeah?
Hi, did you know High Strangeness is looking for you? If you've seen something strange or experienced something, we want to know. Go to this website and the email address. Thanks, and let's get back to the show. That's wonderful. So just so that the listeners are following along with this is what I'm hearing, but I don't want to assume. You're being given, either you're taken back or being given a glimpse of you before coming to Earth.
Yes.
So you're seeing that whole process before you came here.
Yes.
That's amazing. Okay. And the creator, how would you describe, was it just everywhere in light, or did you see something?
All right, I'll get into that.
Okay, sorry.
So at this point, I was still looking at the souls I had been with. That was what my attention was focused on. But God, after explaining all this, said, before I was going to go on my journey, basically said, would you like to see my face? And I said, okay, sure. And so my attention turned, and I went from looking at all these souls I had been with, and my attention turned, and I was facing this huge sun-like entity. It looked like a sun, except there was like millions and millions and millions, just countless souls that were kind of like inside this sun-like entity, and they were all moving around, and they were extremely happy. I couldn't even describe their happiness. But some of them came to the surface, and I could see their face clearly, and they were like, welcomed me into existence. So they like simultaneously maintained their individuality, and yet they were like part of this sun-like entity that I view as God. Somehow they like had the best of both worlds, I guess I would say. But they basically understood, where I was in my development, and they assured me that when I was ready that I would join them. And like they had already been through this process of education, and they knew it was going to be difficult, but they were excited because I was going to join them, and I would bring something. It's like each soul is unique and irreplaceable, and so when I joined them, it would actually improve their happiness. Like it would make things even better for them. And so they're really excited about that. Even though there was like millions and millions and millions of souls, me joining them would make things even a little bit better. And so they're really happy about that. So how I viewed God, how I saw God, was a huge sun-like entity with millions and millions of souls all mixed in together, kind of existing as one entity, I guess. But God asked me, are you sure you're willing to go through this? And it was like a no-brainer. It was like, God created me, loved me. I understood that a wonderful existence was in store for me, so I accepted. And God was very pleased that I accepted this challenge or education or whatever you call it. And with that, it's like I was shooting away from that scene very quickly, like leaving the light, going into like a darker place. And we started looking at like thousands and thousands of different planets I could go to. It's like it was all the same situation. I would be a spiritual entity having a physical life. It would have been on different, or could have been on different planets. But we looked at all these different planets, and finally we got to Earth, and there was something about Earth, like I was absolutely positive. This is the life this is where I want it to be. This is where I want it to get my experience. And God said, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure. This is where I want to be." And with that, the decision was made. And with that, it's like that whole scene that took like just a fraction of a second to show me. It's like it answered that initial question I had about why I was there in the first place. And so then I was back to floating around my yard, and I still had more questions. I was like, okay, well, I understand, where I came from, how I ended up on Earth, but why am I Aaron Green? Like, why am I living as this person? How did that happen? And so again, something I'd previously been through, like this memory replayed for me in extreme detail. And it started out, in that first description I had, I was a brand new soul who had never been to Earth before. But now the second memory, I was like an experienced soul. Like I had lived many lives before that, and I was much more mature. But I was in an unhappy state. I was like frustrated with myself. I was like mentally disheveled. I don't know if confused is the right word, but the biggest thing I would say is I was frustrated with myself. Like I had screwed up. Like I had made a series of mistakes, and that kind of dominated my thinking, my feeling, and I was kind of a mess, frankly. And I was working with some guides, and the guides were basically they were trying to encourage me to go back to Earth, and I was refusing to go back to Earth. I was like, no, I'm not going back to Earth, and you can't make me. And they said, okay, you're right. We can't make you, but if you go back to Earth, you'll be able to help some other souls. Would it be okay if we showed you some of the souls you could help if you went back to Earth? And I said, well, okay, I guess we could look at that. And so they showed me. They showed me, okay, you would be able to help this soul. And they showed me someone else and said you would be able to help them. And that kind of, it like triggered something deeper in me where I was like, well, yeah, well, that would be cool if I could help them. And that kind of softened me. And I was like, okay, we can look at the possibilities. And so the guides and I, we like transitioned to like a different scene, or a realm. I'm not sure what to call it, but it was like a planning realm. And we started looking at different people I could become if I came back to Earth. And they had a plan. Okay, here's someone you could become. And they showed me this life I could lead where I would be like an extremely angry person. I think I would have like a really rough childhood, maybe abusive parents or something like that. And my whole life would be dominated by anger. But by working against that anger, my soul would constantly be working against that anger. And so my soul would grow to become more peaceful, even though it would be like an angry person. So it's kind of contradictory to what you might think, but working against this anger constantly would grow me in the way I needed, which was to be more peaceful. And I kind of interpret from that I must have done something violent in a previous life, but I don't know for sure. But that's kind of how I interpret that. But anyway, I completely rejected that life. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to live that life. And they respected my decision. They completely respected that. They're like, okay, well, let's look at some other possibilities. And so, excuse me, we saw another set of parents I could have. And we started looking at the possibilities of what kind of genetic traits they had and what kind of person I could be, what kind of life I could live. And we started looking at the options available. And it became clear that these parents we were looking at, like they had the genes available, they could have a redheaded child. And somehow that really appealed to me. I really liked that idea of having a rare hair color, like seeing that red hair was rare on this planet. Like that was obvious. That was really easy. And I really liked that. And I liked being a girl because I felt like they'd be less violent, like less prone to hurting others. And I really liked that and I assume that's because I'd, been violent in a previous life. I don't know. But like it wasn't quite the right fit for me. The genes available, there weren't like enough options, and it just wasn't a good fit. It wasn't right. I would have been kind of like socially awkward. I wouldn't have gotten married. I wouldn't have had kids. It just wasn't the right kind of life that I wanted to live. So we started looking at some other options. Well, what about boys? And redheaded boys, it didn't work at all. But we started looking at, okay, well, what about different hair colors? What about a brown-haired, And there was just tons and tons of options for these parents for brown hair. Like I could pick any kind of traits I wanted with a brown-haired child. So it quickly became obvious that a brown-haired boy gave me better options for the kind of life I wanted to live. And so I started saying, okay, well, I want to be really good looking, like the best looking guy on the planet. And my guides were like, okay, well, those options are available with these parents, but here's the spiritual downsides of making that choice. If you choose to be extremely good looking, this is directly for me. It's not true for everybody, but I would be arrogant. I'd be conceited. Women would treat me differently, and I would end up being too promiscuous. And it was obvious that as you move to higher spiritual levels, being like really promiscuous, they don't fit together. It's like monogamy is more like what fits in with the higher level spiritual development. Being very promiscuous, it's just not a high level activities from a spiritual perspective. So anyway, it was obvious that wasn't a good fit for me, that wasn't right. So we backed the attractiveness down to, something a little more average. I'm not saying ugly or anything like that, but I mean just closer to average, okay?
Yeah.
And then we started looking at intelligence, and it was the same kind of deal. I wanted to be like the smartest guy on the planet, like one of the smartest guys in history. And my guides were like, okay, well, these parents have those genes, but here's the downside. You would be arrogant. You would have trouble making friends. You would look down on everyone else because they're not as smart, and you would become atheist. And it became obvious that for my spiritual development, these weren't good choices. Like this wasn't a good fit. So just the same kind of way we lowered the intelligence. We backed it down to a more average intelligence. Still smart. I'm a smart guy, but nothing no super genius, nothing like that. And we looked at every detail about this body, every physical characteristic. Like I was able to pick what I wanted from the genes available. And if I really wanted something different, we could have gone on to different parents. But they had what started to look like the right fit for me. And so when we picked the body, down to the most intimate detail, like everything, I had input on all of it. My guides pointed out that, okay, well, there's some unintended consequences of these choices you've made. You would have terrible acne as a teenager if you go with this choice. And we took a close look at that. And it wasn't the intention, but it was like a side effect of all the other decisions we've made. But it was like it was difficult enough that they needed to bring it to my attention. And as a soul, I remember, that's like 2 years of your life as a teenager where you'd have really bad acne, and I could see how bad it would be and how difficult that would be. And it's hard to say how short 2 years of frustration appeared from a spiritual perspective. It felt like almost nothing. And what also stood out is that difficulty would actually help me in my spiritual development. And for that reason, I was like, okay, well, that's fine. That's acceptable. I accept that hardship. And once we had the body picked, my guides said, okay, well, we've got some stuff planned for your life. And they started showing me stuff I had done in previous lives. And some of the stuff I had done in previous lives was going to directly affect how, some stuff that was going to happen in this current life. And the most clear-cut example I could give you is they showed me in a previous life I'd gotten in a fight. I'd been kind of a big guy, and basically I beat up this smaller guy. And I totally could have avoided the fight. I didn't need to. I beat him up real bad, and I totally didn't need to. And they showed me this, and it was obvious from that spiritual perspective where I could see the full picture that I had done something that I shouldn't have done. I had mistreated this guy. And now it's like I was going to be on the receiving end of that same kind of treatment. It's like I had written a check in a previous life, and now I was going to cash it in this life, or I had bad karma in that life, or it was an unbalanced equation. Like I had done something in a previous life, and now it needed to be balanced out in this life. And spiritually, it made perfect sense, and it was very clear how this worked. But this wasn't a punishment. This was just like my education, and this was just how this physical realm worked. But they showed me that the plan was I would have my nose broken as a teenager, and it's kind of like that would balance out the different events, and it would give me the education I needed to learn. And they showed me other stuff I had done in previous lives, and they showed me how it was going to affect my upcoming life. All kinds of stuff. Some of it's too personal to get into. But they needed my agreement for all of these plans. They couldn't just force it on me. But I agreed to it because I knew this stuff I had done in a previous life. It was like it was holding me back spiritually, and I would be able to liberate myself from my own previous poor decisions by going through some of these hardships during this life, which would allow me to progress to higher levels of happiness when I returned back to the spiritual realm. And so we went through a number of different things in previous lives, and not all of it was bad. Some of it was good. It was a mix. And when we got through all of that, then my guides had some arrangements that they wanted to make. There was like other souls where I could help. I would be in a good position to help them, or they would be in a good position to help me. And so there was a number of events that were planned out between me and other souls, and it was for either I would be helping them or they would be helping me. It was kind of a mix. But a lot of that stuff was planned out by my guides with their guides at like a higher level. But a lot of stuff, like, they needed my agreement in order to make it happen. They couldn't like force this stuff on me. But I agreed to all kinds of stuff because I knew, it would either help me or it'd help somebody else, or somehow it would, benefit humanity, all kinds of reasons. But when we had all these different decisions made, my guide said, "Okay, are you sure you're willing to live this life?" And I agreed. I said, "Yes, I'm." We took a holistic view of everything that I had chosen, how it all looked together, and I said, "Yes, I choose that life." And they were very clear that I would always maintain my free will. I could. These plans were all laid out, but if I needed to, I wanted to, I chose to, I could, go a different route, and that they could, they would be able to accommodate that just fine. It wasn't any kind of problem. And with that, it's like my question had been answered, and now I was back to, like floating around my neighbor's yard. And I had one more big question. I asked, I wanted to know, okay, I see where I came from, how I came to Earth, why I'm Aaron Green, but like, what was I doing between previous lives? Like, it was obvious that we go back and forth between the spiritual realm and the physical realm. It's like, kind of like day and night. Like we just go back and forth repeatedly for a while as we get this education. And so anyway, I asked that question, and I got snippets of where I had been previously between lives. And, some of it was happy realms and some of it was negative realms. I saw that, between one previous life, I had been like in this really horrible realm, like this hellish realm. I had been I guess I'd been a violent person in life, and then in death, I was a violent soul. And so I was with others who were just like me. We were all like the same, and we just fought constantly. I looked like a monster, and we just fought. That was the only thing we knew, was fighting each other, trying to kill each other, trying to dominate each other. But no matter how badly we injured each other, the wounds would quickly heal, and we just kept fighting, and it was just absolutely miserable. But after a while, I don't know if I got tired of the fighting or what, but something in me changed. Like, I changed, and I didn't want to fight anymore. And I stopped fighting with those around me. And like, as soon as I stopped fighting, this being of light like swooped down and pulled me up out of this horrible fight. And I asked him, why did you pull me up out of this fight? And he told me, when I stopped fighting with those around me, I didn't belong there anymore. And he further told me, everyone there will eventually leave. Like, none of them are, they're all going to leave there eventually. None of them are stuck like that forever. And as I understand it, he then helped me transition on to another life. I saw another realm I had been in between lives where I had been in, it was like we were in extreme darkness. I was with some others who were with me. We were all in the same situation. We were like lost and confused, and it was dark, and we didn't know what was going on. And there was beams of light going around, like trying to help us. But we had been, I think, like the kind of person in life who wouldn't help somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so we just had a great deal of trouble accepting that these beings of light were trying to help us. Like, that was such a foreign concept that we had trouble understanding that. But eventually I accepted that help, and I think that being of light transitioned me to another new life. Another previous time between lives, I had been in some kind of, it looked like a town you might see on Earth, but it was really dark. Like, it wasn't bright, and everyone there was kind of unhappy, but not miserable, just a little unhappy. And again, a being of light was going around trying to help us, but they couldn't force help on us. It's like we needed to accept that help. But eventually I accepted his help, and he helped me transition out of that realm. But then I also saw that I had been in some happy realms. One of these realms was, it looked like a city on Earth, kind of like a medieval city. I think this had been some medieval life I lived. And it was like very bright. It looked like a earthly village or town, but like everything was better. Like all the buildings were better, the streets were better. There was no manure or bugs or problems. There was none of that. It was like a perfected version of Earth, and that's where I was. And the souls there, they were doing the same kind of stuff they had done on Earth, but they were much happier. Like everybody was really happy there. But somehow I recognized that this was like a midway realm. Like it was like it wasn't as good as it gets. So I quickly left that realm. And I saw another realm I had been in, which was what I would only describe as a city of light. It's like the buildings were translucent and made of light, and the souls there were all translucent and made of light, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And the happiness of these souls was kind of like indescribable. Just absolutely, absolutely beautiful. And so I saw that I'd been in, a number of different realms between lives, and it's like that kind of like answered my question, and I was back to floating around my neighbor's yard, and I started to have, it's like this whole time I was like waking up, I was becoming more comfortable being in that form of existence, and more self-aware, and like more intelligent, kind of like waking up from a deep sleep. And I had the realization, oh my gosh, after this life, I get to return to one of these really happy realms. Like I get myself straightened out, I can go back to a happy realm, and I was so excited. And I remembered that I had some deep friends that I existed with in this happy realm, and I really wanted to go see these friends again. Like I can't describe how much I wanted to see them. And I was ready to go. I was done with this physical life. I was ready to go off to this heavenly realm. And like right when I had that thought, this being of light came at me very quickly, and this was like a very powerful, like large being. And he was like translucent and absolutely beautiful and made of light. And I want to point out one thing about this translucent nature. We look at each other, we can see these facial features, and we can, like you can see something about me, like how happy I am, how old I am, whatever, and vice versa. But with the translucent being, you can like see into them, and you can like know them at a deeper level. Like there's surface level characteristics and features, but there's internal features as well that you can see. And so there's like this deep intimacy of being able to see deep into this, deep into their soul, that was really beautiful. And I'm not sure how better to describe it, but it was just absolutely beautiful. And but he immediately said, "You are not to leave your body." And it's like, bam, I was back in my body. He sent me back to my body, and I stood up. And I was kind of confused about the whole situation. And I went home and I tried to explain it to my mom. But I would think about this experience for months. Maybe 6 months went by where I would think about this every single day, the stuff I had seen. And my guides contacted me, and I knew exactly who it was. It was like a mental communication. It was like, you hear someone's voice, you know exactly who it was. But I knew exactly who was contacting me. And they basically told me that because of this experience that I had, it was interfering with me living life the way I was intended to live life. It was like it was causing me issues. And they explained further that because I had like firsthand knowledge of some of the spiritual stuff, like I knew that God is real. It wasn't like any question. Like I just knew it. Yeah. It's like I couldn't develop faith, and they explained that developing faith is very important. And that I was like shortchanging myself by not, like I could never develop faith, and that was like a spiritual shortcoming. Like it's that important that they wanted to take this, they wanted to hide this knowledge from me so that I could develop faith, is kind of how they worded it. And they further pointed out that, some of what I had seen was pretty deep stuff, and they needed to change my life plan a little bit to prepare me to handle some of the stuff I saw. and it would result in my life being more difficult. But they needed my approval for all this. But I understood that these were my guides. They were there to help me. I followed what they were saying well enough that I knew they were looking out for my best interest. So I agreed to what they suggested, even though I didn't really like it because it meant my life was going to be more difficult. But I agreed to it. And so they hid my memories. And from that time on, I didn't think about my experience anymore. Remember, I'm a little kid now.
Yeah.
And, I went through life. As a teenager, I had my nose broken. I had no idea that was something I had agreed to spiritually. I got older. I went through other stuff that I had no idea I had agreed to. Got married, had kids. And then I think about 13 years ago, I was reading a Newsweek magazine article by a guy named Eben Alexander. He's a neurosurgeon who had a near-death experience. And somehow reading about his experience, it like triggered, like I believed what he was saying. Like I had faith in what he was saying. And like I think I had more faith in God listening to his experience than I had previously. Somehow it just really hit me just right. And it caused these memories that I hadn't thought about for 30 years. They all came back to me. And, now I was an adult. I had been through a lot in life, and I could understand a lot of the stuff I had seen as an adult that I couldn't really understand as a kid. And so that was like 13 years ago. And so now I've just been trying to share that experience when I can ever since.
Wow, that's amazing, man. So what do you think? So you understand now why you probably needed to forget that for a period of time.
Right.
Right. Yeah. There was a reason for it.
Yeah.
Because that's the first thing I would think of is like, oh man, like, why did you make me forget that? But it's clear they explained it.
Yeah, right. They explained it, and I agreed to it.
Yeah. Okay, I've got quite a few questions here.
Okay.
Let me ask you, I think it's interesting to me that it sounds like there are many, many worlds with people like us. Like when you had the opportunity to go somewhere, were
Right.
they physical beings like us, or was it a variation of beings, or maybe you didn't know?
So, like, what exactly they look like, I couldn't say. I don't know.
Okay.
I may have known it at the time, but I didn't retain that information.
Gotcha.
But they were,
physical
beings, and they had a soul that was, driving them around, just like us.
Yeah.
It would have been the same kind of situation, and they can learn, love, kindness, compassion, honesty. They can learn all those traits just like we can. And there's not like a benefit for one over the other. It's just a different way of gaining that information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so based on that, as far as I could tell, there's just, I don't know, countless worlds out there with physical beings who have a spiritual nature, just like us.
Yeah, and over the years, since you've been a child to now, science can validate that there are stars without, you
Right.
can't count them. So who knows how many worlds are out there
Right.
that have other beings on it. I think that's amazing. Do you think, so when you were describing I think it was really cool. They gave you some real insight into the plan for the individual you would be.
Right.
In some cases where you were concerned that you might have been violent or whatever, do you think that some of this behavior is linked and tied to the physical side of the body? So you knew you were going as a spirit into that. Were you locked into the experiences and traits of that flesh? Or was that, how did you feel about that? Like,
Right.
does the question make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I'd say it's a balance. It's a balance of the two. Like, yeah, our physical nature, our predispositions, how we're raised, that absolutely affects us. But the soul's running the show. The soul is in charge. And, the soul is making the decisions when it comes down to it. But obviously, if you have a very difficult childhood, for example, you're going to face different challenges and decisions than you will if you have a very easy childhood. And our guides understand all that, and they're able to perfectly accommodate for what we need and what we've done in past lives, how we've contributed to society. Like all of that is taken into account as far as what opportunities are available for us and what challenges we need. Like they help plan all that out perfectly. And I know everyone thinks some of these difficulties I'm facing, like I would have chosen that. Well, maybe you would have if you could see the benefit that you gain out of these difficult experiences. it might change your perspective on some of that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's funny as I'm listening to you talk about this, I know, at least for me in my life, there's been times where I've tried so hard to steer my life in a certain direction, and it really didn't matter in the end, because
Right.
it felt like all of, everything about reality recorrected my life's path back to where it looked like it was going originally.
Yeah, yeah. I
You
know
know,
what you mean.
when I hear you talk about, like these are the things that are going to happen, it's almost, I don't want to say predestined, but in a way, it's predetermined to a point. It feels like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I view it like planning a vacation. You're planning to go on some trip. You plan what hotel you're going to go to, maybe what restaurants, what you're going to see, where you're going to stay. But once you're on the vacation, you can modify the plan. You can make some changes here and there. But you have this plan. You're more or less going to follow it. You don't have to. You could change it at any time. But that's pretty much how it's going to go for most people. And that's kind of how I view life. You got this plan, and it's for your benefit. It's going to benefit you. So that's why your guides kind of help encourage you to make certain decisions and stay on certain paths. And, in the end, you reap a benefit for that. Like, this is planned out because it provides the maximum benefit to you spiritually. Yeah. And, they kind of help keep us on track. And that's a good thing. That helps us. Even though we might wish, I wish my life was easier. Well, there's a benefit to these hardships, and that's kind of why you're going through them.
Yeah, yeah. And so it seems like we live many lives.
Right.
And we're continually trying to improve and fine tune the soul. Does that sound like maybe what you experienced?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was what I say is, it was painfully obvious to me that we all have multiple lives, and our soul learns and it grows and it gets better through each one of these lives. We're getting better. We're moving in the right direction, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Did you get any sense for where, this wasn't a question you asked, so maybe, I really love that you were giving some answers to your questions. It was like, here, let me show you, right? So this wasn't a question I think you asked, but I'm wondering if you have a thought or an impression on this. Where do we ultimately go or become? Do we go back to the same place with knowledge, or do we become something new or different? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think ultimately our final destination is back with God, but we have the maturity and the knowledge, and we have chosen to be the kind of soul that can properly enjoy that and fit in with other loving souls. But in the meantime, we're going through these educations, and maybe we could work as a spirit guide, or there's spiritual functions that these souls they take part in. They like they have jobs that I don't really understand. But our final destination, I think, is back with God, but we're able to enjoy that in a way that I could not when I was a brand new soul. I just wasn't able to enjoy all that happiness that was there. But when we're done with this process, we'll be able to really enjoy that on a level that's indescribable.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like fear of death is not the same for you as maybe somebody else.
Yeah, death isn't, there's no fear of death whatsoever. Now I say that, but, I have a wife, I have kids, I have parents that, they're getting elderly and I'm trying to help them. So I am concerned that my death would affect a lot of people. So I'm very much aware of that. But for me personally, like to die, hey, it doesn't concern me. I'm not scared of it whatsoever. The only thing I'm scared of is my own ability to hurt other people, to make poor decisions, to make decisions that hurt others. That's what scares me. That's the concerns that I have right now.
Yeah, and I love the part where you talked about the ability to perceive with a new sense your impact to somebody else. You were talking about your father and the frustration changing a diaper or something like that. You could see that and feel that, that extra sense. That's pretty cool. That's really cool to be able to understand somebody deeper like that.
Well, it really brings it home that what we do affects others, but how we affect others ends up affecting us. It's like, you throw a rock in a pond, that ripple goes out, but then it hits the shore and it comes back. And like what we do, what we send out, is going to come back to us. So we might as well get with the program and work that to our benefit and send out good things, like be good to other people. Like that will benefit us tremendously if we can do that.
Yeah. And you had mentioned family, right? So one of the things I think of is just the immense love I have for my kids and grandkids.
Right.
Do you feel like when passing, we're reconnected with them? Because that would be the only point of sadness if you go back to this collective. And maybe that's because of the narrow perspective of being on this planet.
Right.
But what are your thoughts about that? When you think of your own kids and stuff, like, are you worried that you may lose contact with them or anything like that?
No, I'm not worried about that at all. I think we're able to have contact with the ones we love without any problem. There's some rules and stipulations to how that works that I got a little bit of insight to, because we end up on different levels. Like we're not all on the same level. But it's really easy to go down from a higher level to a lower level and visit anyone you want to. That's pretty straightforward in the spiritual realms. But we maintain the love of our, brother, sister, children, parents. That stays when we pass away, and we can still interact with them. But not only that, that spans multiple lives. So over, let's say, the course of 10 lives, you have 10 sets of parents. Well, you have that love for all 10 sets of parents. You haven't lost any of that. Like that remains. And so you're just growing your connections with others, which is a good thing. And so you have that deep intimacy, that deep love with more and more souls as you go through more lives. You're not losing anything. You're not losing any of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Once again, the narrow perspective of being here on this planet. That's all I could think of. But you're right. If you have these connections and relationships multiple times, you're right. Those numbers get pretty big.
Right. Yeah.
Trying to think what else. My mind is kind of moving on this because there's so much here that is so interesting. What do when people hear your story, what do they say? I mean, are they pretty? Are they encouraged? Because it sounds like a very positive thing here for people to look at.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. An interview like this, most of the people watching something like this are pretty open-minded, Mm-hmm. And most of the feedback I get is pretty positive. But yeah, I get negative feedback. I get people telling me I'm going to burn in hell. I get that kind of stuff sometimes, or I'm crazy. I imagined all this. And my response to that is, well, if you think that about me, that's fine. That's fair enough. But there's thousands and thousands, there's literally millions of people who are saying the same kind of thing I am about their near-death experience. We're not all crazy, okay? There's enough of us saying the same thing that, hey, maybe you should listen to what we're saying. And what we're saying is pretty, or at least what I'm saying is pretty straightforward. Just, hey, love your neighbor, be good, exercise those traits that we're talking about. So yeah, the responses I get are a mix, but fortunately, they're mostly positive, and so I really appreciate that most of the people that comment, they have something nice to say for the most part.
Aaron, how are you sharing this going forward? It sounds like you want people to know about this, and you're on the show now, and I know you've done other things too. What's your what are you doing to send that message out to people?
Sure. So I'm just trying to share my experience however I can, and that includes interviews. I'm working on a book right now where I lay out my experience in more detail, and that'll be available in the near future. And I have a YouTube channel where sometimes I talk about different topics that I think are important or aren't addressed significantly in other places. And I have a website, AaronThomasGreen.com. I'm easy to find, and I got a number of different things going on. And if anybody wants to contact me, I'm easy to find on Facebook, or you can email me at AaronGreen1975@gmail.com, or contact me through my other stuff. I'm pretty easy to find these days, which is nice. And the book I mentioned is coming out hopefully next month, or you'd be able to buy it on Amazon, of course, or you can download it for free from my website. Okay, you don't have to buy it, if you're interested in my story. So any way I can share my experience and try to, help people understand the importance of just being a decent person, doing those things that are right. That's kind of my main focus.
Yeah, your YouTube site. What's the call there that people?
Yeah,
can
if you search YouTube Aaron Thomas Green, it'll come right up. Emerging from the Light is actually the name of my book, and that's part of the name of my YouTube channel as well. But I had a branding guy contact me, and he gave me a little free advice and says, I should just focus on your name. Like, that's what everybody's going to remember anyway. So that's what I went with. And so if you get my name and you search it, it'll be pretty easy to find anything I'm working on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think this is an amazing story. Really very optimistic, very positive, just wonderful, like for how people can look at reality and their experiences. And, sometimes people get a raw deal here in life, and, maybe these are a choice we made going into it, right? Like
Right.
knowing that, hey, this is going to be a tough thing. I still want to do it.
Yeah, I view it like, going to the gym. We are like souls that are at a gym. And the guy lifting the 5-pound weights, that's easy. But he's not going to gain the kind of muscle that the guy lifting the 50-pound weights is going to gain. And so, yeah, some people have really easy lives, but they're not going to gain necessarily the same spiritual advancement that someone with a more difficult life might gain. As far as I can tell, generally speaking, the people with the more difficult lives are going to have more spiritual growth. And so there's a fairness there to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Aaron, this has been great. I really appreciate it. In closing, is there anything you want to say to people about all of this?
Yeah. I think some of these are real fascinating details, but what I saw is important. The most important thing, love your neighbor. Like, be good to others. Exercise kindness, compassion, honesty, integrity, service, generosity, all those kind of traits. Like that's what God is, and that's what we need to focus on. And if you can do that, not only will you be helping those around you, but ultimately you're going to be helping yourself. And so if you can just make some sort of effort along those lines, you're really going to appreciate that when you return to the spiritual realm and you get to reap what you've sowed.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Aaron, let me keep you on the line here. But for everybody else out there, what happens before and after this experience? Well, there you go. Aaron has just explained from his experience in pretty detail all the interesting things that surround our experience here. Want to know more about it? Want to think more about it? Aaron just shared his website, shared that he's got a book coming out, and just consider and ponder, right? Awesome. Aaron, thank you. And
All right.
Everybody else out there, thank you for being with us today. Aaron Green, thank you for sharing that with us.
All right. Thank you, Tony.
Hi. We need your help to get bigger and better. How? Just like, comment, and subscribe. It's free, and it just takes a few seconds. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.